Greetings in the name of our soon-coming King Jesus Christ, and welcome to this episode. Palm Sunday, or the triumphal entry of Jesus Christ into Jerusalem. Did you know this is one of the most amazing subjects in the Bible? It is in the fulfillment of some ancient Bible prophecies. It has so many layers of great importance. It is really one of the most exciting, most amazing subjects in the pages of the Bible. And in this video, I'm going to unpack this for you. In this video, we're going to look into the Bible prophecies that predicted the Palm Sunday, or the entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, into its finest details, and how those prophecies were fulfilled. And also, we are going to look into some other amazing details regarding this great event, and how, in fact, this same event is going to repeat yet again. Guys, this is an amazing subject matter in the Bible prophecy. Let's get into it. Did you know the triumphal entry of Jesus Christ into Jerusalem was prophesied by Zechariah in chapter 9? The first entry of Jesus, I say, because it's going to happen yet again. And in fact, Zechariah has prophesied all two of the entrances of Jesus into Jerusalem. Now I'm going to zoom into this first entrance, or the Palm Sunday as we know it. Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, this prophet prophesies and says, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, your king is coming to you. He is just and having salvation, lovely, and riding on a donkey, a colt, the foal of a donkey." Zechariah says that the king of Israel is going to come on a donkey, and he tells the Israelites to rejoice. And what is so amazing is when you turn to the events that happened, those events were recorded in all four of the Gospels. When you turn to those events, how Jesus entered Jerusalem on the Palm Sunday, that is an exact fulfillment of what Zechariah wrote in chapter 9, verse 9. In fact, did you know the Palm Sunday, or the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, is one of the subjects that has been covered in all four Gospels? Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all four of them wrote about it. And we're gonna look into those. Let me just first give you the chapters and verses. Matthew wrote about the Palm Sunday in Matthew chapter 21, verses 1 to 9. Mark wrote about the same thing in chapter 11, verses 1 to 10. Luke wrote about the Palm Sunday in chapter 19, verses 28 to 40. John wrote about the Palm Sunday in chapter 12, verses 12 to 15. And all four of the Gospels clearly stated it is the King of Israel coming to Jerusalem. And all four of the Gospels referred to the prophecy of Zechariah. So people understood when Jesus entered Jerusalem, people understood it was the King of Israel coming. Before I go any further, let me just go to the record of Matthew regarding this, and let me read it, because there is so much in this. Now, Matthew chapter 21, from verse 1, "Now when they drew near Jerusalem and came to Bethphage at the Mount of Olives." Now pay attention to the Mount of Olives, guys, because this Mount of Olives is an amazing geolocation that we're going to talk about it a bit later. It is a very significant place. Jesus and his disciples come to the Mount of Olives, and from there Jesus sends two of his disciples and tells them, "Go into the village opposite you immediately, and you will find a donkey tied, a colt with her, and loose them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, you shall say, 'The Lord has need of them,' and immediately he will send them." All this was done that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by a prophet, referring to Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9. And here it paraphrases it. "Tell the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you." lowly, sitting on a donkey, a foal of a donkey. It is quoting Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, as I said. So the disciples goes, and the disciples went ahead and they did exactly as Jesus commanded them. They brought a donkey and a colt, and they laid their clothes on the donkey. And Jesus sat on him, and a very great multitude spread their clothes on the road, and others cut down branches from trees and spread them on the road. Then multitudes went before him, and those who followed him cried out. Now listen to this. Jesus is on the Mount of Olives. The disciples brought the donkey, and they put their clothes on it, and Jesus sit on the donkey, and Jesus travels from the Mount of Olives through the Kidron Valley into Jerusalem. If you have ever been to Jerusalem, you will know from the Mount of Olives to get into Jerusalem, the direct route is via the Golden Gate or the Eastern Gate. Now that's another important detail I want to bring to your attention. Jesus entered the city via the Golden Gate. And as Jesus entered the city, the disciples and the multitudes of people in Jerusalem gathered together, and they welcome Jesus with palm branches, and they shout out, "Hosanna to the Son of David, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest." Guys, there are so many great details here. I'm going to try to recap some of them. Hosanna to the Son of David, when they say that, they are revoking, they are remembering, they are shouting out in connection to God's promise to the Jews for a kingdom, and the king of that kingdom is going to be the Son of David. That's why they are saying, Hosanna to the Son of David. They're basically saying, this is the day the Son of David comes to Jerusalem to establish the kingdom God promised to Abraham and King David, and God reminded us throughout generations through many of his prophets. That's basically what they're saying. They're welcoming the King of Israel, King of Jews, and they know Yeshua Messiah comes with the kingdom, the promised kingdom, under his arm. People are rejoicing, people are celebrating, and they are saying another amazing word which the Jews don't say for anyone else other than the promised Messiah. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. The Hebrew phrase for blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord actually is Baruch, haba, b'Hashem, Adonai. And this is the phrase they only use for the Messiah, the King of the Jews. So now the crowds that gather together, they understood the one right now coming via the way of Mount of Olives, entering into Jerusalem by way of the Eastern Gate, or also known as the Golden Gate, is no one other than the Messiah, Son of David, and he is coming with the promised kingdom to the Jews. This is a big moment. This is probably the biggest moment in the history of the Jewish nation throughout all these generations. They never came so close. The King of the Jews never, the heavenly King, and he is no ordinary king. He is the promised heavenly King. They understood it. They understood this. They knew this very well. That's why they welcome him, this messianic messianic greeting that is reserved only for the King of the Jews. I like the way how John describes the same scenario. John says about this, let's go to John's writing. John chapter 12, verse 12. Now Jesus enters the city, and listen, verse 13, to be more precise. John chapter 12, verse 13. People put the palm branches and they went out. Okay, people put the palm branches down and they went out to greet Jesus, and they cry out. Listen to what John says. People cry out, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel. They knew he is the King of Israel. They knew, and that's why they keep saying, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. In fact, Mark, Matthew, Luke, John, all four of them record people were crying out, Hosanna, Baruch haba b'shem Adonai. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord, the King of Israel, the Son of David. It's amazing. The Jews understood this was their appointed moment to receive their long-awaited promised king from heaven who comes with the promised kingdom from heaven. They knew that. They understood that. And they welcomed him as a king into the city. What is so another amazing detail is the fact that Jesus entered the city by way of the eastern gate. Did you know the city of Jerusalem has many gates, I think 12 gates, and the gate, there is only one gate among all the gates of the city of Jerusalem. There's only one gate that enters directly into the temple, and that is the eastern gate. And the eastern gate, or also it's called the golden gate, because when the sun sets, the sunlight makes that gate shine like a golden gate. Now, only the priests and the promised Messiah is actually permitted to enter and exit through that gate. Did you know that? People are not allowed to use that gate. That gate was reserved only for the high priest, and that gate was also used for the entry of the sacrificial animals into the temple. Now, Jesus used that very gate to enter Jerusalem on a colt from the Mount of Olives. And the Jewish people knew the significance of that. They knew here is the Messiah coming on a colt from the Mount of Olives, just as prophesied by Zechariah, and entering into Jerusalem by way of the eastern gate, which is the gate of the King of Israel. They knew this is the King of Israel. They knew it. All the prophecies were right in front of their eyes being fulfilled. They couldn't be happier. They couldn't be more excited. They couldn't be more overwhelmed with God delivering them this long-awaited kingdom. Remember, many Christians don't understand that God promised a kingdom to the Jews, and Jews have been waiting for this kingdom. That kingdom promise goes all the way back to the days of Abraham, and it was repeated and further reinforced by the prophecies God gave to King David. That's why also, as Matthew wrote it, people were crying out, Hosanna, blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. And I think it was Mark and Luke, they say, blessed is the one, the son of David. Let's go to what Mark says. Let's read what Mark says. Mark gives even more explanation. Again, same incident. Mark says, people were crying out saying, Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the kingdom of our father David that comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest. You see, the Jews understood. This is the King of Israel coming. The heavenly king from heaven coming with the heavenly kingdom under his arm. This is the son of David. This is the blessed King of Israel. They understood that. And they welcome him with this messianic greeting. They welcome him as a king in the light of the Bible prophecies. This is overwhelming. I can't express to you how overwhelming, how exciting this must have been for the Jews in those days. And Luke explains the same incident. Luke says, people were crying out and saying, blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest. Do you see, people? Do you see what's going on there? The King of heaven comes on a donkey into Jerusalem in fulfillment of ancient Bible prophecies to deliver a kingdom God promised to Jews as far back as the days of Abraham and King David. And people understood that. And people welcomed him. But there was a problem. There was a serious problem. Although people understood who King Jesus was and they welcomed him as the king, the religious leaders who held the authority and power, they also understood who this man is. They recognized him. They recognized, yes, indeed, this man is the King of the Jews. Yes, indeed, this man is the long-awaited King from heaven. They knew that. They were no ignorant. But unlike the ordinary people, the religious leaders' hearts were against him. The ordinary people embraced the Messiah. And they said, "Come, King of Israel, Son of David, come and establish your kingdom among us." But the Jewish religious leaders said, "No, we don't want you. Why are you coming now?" Let's look at what I think it was in Luke. Let's look at what, yes, Luke. In Luke it is captured well. Let's look at what the religious leaders did. As Jesus enters into Jerusalem on this colt, coming from the Mount of Olives, as the promised king, bringing the kingdom from heaven, people are rejoicing and celebrating and screaming and welcoming him as the king. They are honoring him. They know this is the king from heaven. And the religious leaders in the temple, remember now Jesus enters into the temple. And the religious leaders hear this commotion and they know. In fact, the careful study of the scripture shows that people knew about Jesus on the Mount of Olives, and they knew he's on his way to enter Jerusalem. And the religious leaders come, and here is what they say. Luke chapter 19, verse 39. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, some of them come, and they call out to Jesus from the crowd, and they say, "Hey, teacher, rebuke your disciples." Basically, they were saying, "You are no king. We don't accept you as a king. And please tell your disciples not to call you the King of Israel." That's basically what they were saying. And then upon that, in verse 40, Jesus answers them and tells them, "I tell you, if these should keep silent, the stones would immediately cry out." From the first moment, the religious leaders were opposing Jesus as the King of Heaven entering into the city of Jerusalem. They were basically saying, "We are the rulers here, and we are not gonna recognize the King of Heaven, and we are not gonna give you the throne here in Jerusalem. We are gonna stand against you." Can you see what's going on there? What wicked hearts they had. They knew the scriptures, they knew the prophecy, they knew the Bible, but their hearts were sold to the devil. They were the servants of the devil, not servants of God. It often makes me think of many pastors and preachers today. They know the Bible, they know the scriptures, but they are no servants of the God of heaven. They are servants of the God of the world, Satan himself. Yes, they are parading as preachers and pastors, but they are wicked in their hearts. They are traitors, just like these Pharisees were. And immediately after that, Jesus enters the city, and he weeps over Jerusalem. We are going to look into that later, hopefully in the next week, before we talk about the crucifixion. Because there's a lot happening in the next 1 week's time in Jerusalem. After the triumphal entry to the crucifixion, there is going to be a lot of stuff happening in Jerusalem. And that's going to define the history of humanity. But can you see how serious this event that is taking place. The King of Heaven comes. The King of the Jews come with the promised kingdom under his arm. People, ordinary people, people who are no religious leaders or political leaders, they acknowledge him. They have been studying the scriptures. They recognize him and they welcome him. But the leaders, the political and religious establishment, their hearts were wicked. Their souls were sold to the devil. They were the puppets of the devil himself. And they opposed Jesus. Very sobering. But now, I want to draw your attention to yet another detail regarding this messianic kingdom, messianic greeting. Remember, I said the phrase, the Jews were screaming out, the Israelites were screaming out, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Did you know this is the Hebrew phrase that literally says, "Baruch, haba, Hashem, Adonai." This is the phrase that is reserved only for the King of Israel, the heavenly King of Israel, not the political leaders today, the heavenly King of Israel. And the Jews know one day the Messiah is going to come from heaven and establish a heavenly kingdom for the Jews, because this is the promise God made to Abraham and then King David, and God repeated this promise and reminded the Jews of this promise throughout their generations through many prophets of God. And Jews know that. And there is this phrase they reserve only for this Messiah, for the blessed King of heaven that will come and establish a Jewish kingdom. We know from the Bible prophecy that this prophecy will be only fulfilled at the second coming of Christ. But you know what is so amazing? Zechariah, who prophesied the first coming of Christ, first coming of Messiah, in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 9, which we just read, did you know the same prophet Zechariah also prophesied the second coming of Messiah? And how the Jews will come to their end and they will cry out, how they will be beaten so badly and destroyed and murdered and literally almost wiped out as a nation by the Antichrist. And how at that very final moment, at their very weakest moment, Jews will turn and cry out again for the return of Messiah. But what is so fascinating, let's just go look at that. That is in Zechariah chapter 13. Please, guys, stay with me. This is so amazing. This subject matter is so amazing. As I said, in the whole of the Bible, there are not many other subjects that is as exciting, as real, as dramatic as this event when Messiah came to deliver the kingdom and people accepted him, leaders rejected him, and then they eventually killed him. But in the middle of all these events, there is so many details taking place. Zechariah chapter 13. Now Zechariah prophesies about the very last days before the second coming of Messiah. And he says, "And it shall come to pass that in all the land, the 2/3 of the Jews shall be cut off and die, but the 1/3 shall be left. And I will bring the 1/3 through the fire, and will refine them as silver is refined, and test them as gold is tested. And they will call on my name, and I will answer them. And I will say, this is my people. And each one will say, the Lord is my God." Now, the fulfillment of that prophecy is going to be just before the second. In fact, fulfillment of these verses will be a triggering event for the second coming of Messiah. But you know what what Jesus said when the Jews rejected him, and just before Jesus left Jerusalem for the last time, back to the Mount of Olives. We are going to talk about it next week again, but I want to quickly draw your attention to it. That is in Matthew chapter 23. Let's quickly go to Matthew 23. I'm making you travel back and forth through the pages of the Bible, but this is great stuff, people. This is great stuff. Now, Matthew chapter 23, Jesus cries all over Jerusalem, and he says how many times? Let me just read it. Jesus says, after the Jewish leaders rejected him, Jesus says, "O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, the one who kills the prophets and stones those who are sent to her. How often I wanted to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, but you were not willing. See, your house is left to you desolate. For I say to you, you shall see me no more until you say, Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." Again, that same phrase. People, do you see what I'm reading? When Jesus arrived for the first time on the colt, on the donkey, people were crying out, Baruch haba Adonai, which is translated into English as, "Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." And then Jewish leaders rejected Jesus. And in the next couple of days, they are going to plot to kill him, and eventually they're going to kill him on the cross. But before they kill him, Jesus realized what they're going to do, and he laments over Jerusalem. And then Jesus walks out of Jerusalem, turns his back and walks away. And on that final moment of turning his back and walking away from Jerusalem with a broken heart, Jesus says this exact phrase. He says to the Jews, he says to Jerusalem, "You shall see me no more until you say again, Baruch haba b'Hashem Adonai." Wow. Wow. Jesus is again saying to them, I'm going to come again. And you're going to say this messianic greeting again for me. Then I will come again, and then you will see me. But until that day, until you call me with this messianic greeting, you shall see me no more. That was the final words of Jesus to Jerusalem as he turned his back and walked away. I'm going to talk about this next week a little bit more in detail. But guys, I hope you are seeing what I'm seeing. Amazing details. Amazing details, mind-boggling details, and all of that has played out in that 1 week, in a period of 1 week in Jerusalem, when the King of Heaven came with the promised kingdom. The ordinary people acknowledged and welcomed him. The leaders rejected him and plotted to kill him. Yet another detail before I let you go. Yet another detail, mind-boggling detail again. Mount of Olives. Now, Mount of Olives is the place by which Jesus comes in and goes out of Jerusalem. Did you ever realize that? Zechariah prophesied in chapter 14. Zechariah, again, we are going back to Zechariah. This guy, Zechariah, the prophet of God, had prophesied about the first coming of Messiah and also then the second coming of Messiah. In chapter 9, we read about the first coming of Messiah that Zechariah prophesied, and everything played out exactly as he prophesied. But the same Zechariah also prophesied about the second coming of Messiah. In his prophecy in his book of chapter 13, Zechariah talks about the events that will lead up to the second coming of Messiah. And then in chapter 14, he talks about the actual moment of the second coming of Messiah. And in chapter 14, verse 3 and 4, Zechariah says, "Then the Lord will go forth and fight against those nations as he fights in the day of the battle." That is the moment Christ comes at the second coming to fight against the international army of the Antichrist that is going to be busy killing and literally wiping off the Jewish population. And then verse 4, look at that. Verse 4, Zechariah 14, verse 4. "And in that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall split in two from east to west, making a large valley. Half of the mountain shall move toward north and half toward south." Wow! That is exactly what's going to happen at the second coming of Christ. Physically, he will come a second time from heaven. But let me show you another mind-boggling detail. Another amazing mystery we find in the Bible. You know, when Jesus greeted the Jews goodbye, he traveled back to Mount of Olives. And then after Jesus was crucified, they caught him, and then they captured him and tortured him and crucified him. And after he resurrected and showed himself alive to his disciples and many people for about 40 days. And at the end of that, he ascended to heaven in his visible body after resurrection. Did you know from where did he ascend to heaven? Did you ever notice that? In Acts chapter 1, we read about that. Jesus ascended to heaven, Acts chapter 1, verses 9 to 12. Jesus ascended to heaven from the Mount of Olives. You see, Jesus ascended to heaven from the Mount of Olives in front of his disciples. And then on his second coming, physically from heaven, he will come back on the Mount of Olives. And from there, he will march into the city of Jerusalem once again through the Golden Gate. And the Golden Gate is yet another amazing subject that is connected to this. The Golden Gate is right now closed. Did you know that? The eastern gate of the city of Jerusalem is right now sealed. It's built with bricks and stones. And in fact, the Muslim Ottoman Empire in the years past, they understood from the Bible prophecy that one day the King of the Jews will come from heaven. Listen to this. This is mind-boggling. The Muslims understood a few hundred years ago. They understood that one day the King of the Jews will come from heaven and enter into Jerusalem by the eastern gate of Jerusalem and establish 1,000-year-long Jewish kingdom to rule the whole world. And you know, once the Muslims understood that prophecy, you know what they did? They closed that gate. They built it. They built it with bricks and mortar and closed it. They sealed it. And then some of the Muslim leaders said, but that is not enough. That King of the Jews, he might come and blow it open. Because in Psalm 142, if I'm not wrong, it is prophesied that he's going to come and blow open this gate. And he's going to enter Jerusalem no matter what. So then when they discovered that by sealing the gate, they actually fulfill the prophecies that the gate is going to be sealed until the coming of Messiah. And when he comes, he's going to blow open this gate and enter the city of Jerusalem and build the Jewish kingdom for 1,000 years, no matter what. When the Muslims realized that, they said, no, we need to do something else to prevent his coming. And then they decided they're going to build a Muslim cemetery right in front of the gate on the outside of the city. Because they said the Jews normally don't touch dead bodies and they don't walk into graveyards. If we built there a cemetery and dump all the dead bodies, then the King of the Jews will not dare to come there. By doing so, we are going to prevent the arrival of the King of the Jews. And therefore, today, if you go to Jerusalem, and if you go to the Mount of Olives and look towards the city of Jerusalem, all you're going to see is thousands and thousands of graves on top of one another on the hills, right above the Kidron Valley towards the gate, eastern gate of Jerusalem. And the gate is sealed, closed. You see, guys, these are all Bible prophecies right in front of our eyes. But no matter what, we know that Messiah is going to come physically on the Mount of Olives in fulfillment of Zechariah chapter 14, verse 4. And then Jesus will enter Jerusalem from there. And as Jesus enters, the Jewish people will cry out once again, Baruch, haba, b'Hashem Adonai, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest to the Son of David, the King of Jews, King of Israel. They're going to cry out. I get excited, man. When I read these things, I get so excited. Bible is alive. And the King of Jews is going to come one of these days. He's going to blow open that eastern gate. He's going to enter into the temple, onto the temple ground. But by the coming of Messiah, on that temple ground, there will be no more mosque. There will be the third temple that the Antichrist and the Jews will build together. Jesus will destroy the Antichrist and redeem the 1/3 remnants of his people, the Jews. And he will establish a 1,000-year-long Jewish kingdom to rule the world from Jerusalem. Yes, indeed, as Pontius Pilate wrote on the cross, yes, indeed, Jesus is the King of the Jews. And he is coming back. He is coming back, as the Bible prophecies say. And therefore, I greet you every time when I make a video. I greet you in the name of our soon coming King, Jesus Christ. And now I say goodbye to you in the name of our soon coming King, Jesus Christ. Oh, it's so exciting for me. And I hope it is for you too. May the Lord Jesus Christ bless you. Until the next video, and goodbye.